What's up? It's Keith. It's Plugged On, and so another Teen Wolf review, episode 13 of Season 6, the third episode of 6B of Teen Wolf, entitled Afterimages. So this episode has the unique distinction of being directed by Tyler Posey, the lead star of the show. So this is his directorial debut, and it's I think it's a pretty good episode, like all around. I think it works very well. So let's bump right into it. So the episode starts off right where the last one ended, with Brett running through the woods, and his first thing is to get the arrow out. And when he realizes he can't pull it this way, he kind of manages to push it the whole way through. And then it's Monroe and Gerard are still following him, and Gerard's trying to teach Monroe how to be a better hunter. And though he tries to fight back, Brett tries to fight back, Monroe starts firing at him with a rifle, and so he's forced to run away. And that's the main plot of this episode, is the fact that he's being chased after. So then the next part that we cut to is of Liam and Mason playing, it looks like Mortal Kombat, in their room, and Mason wants to stay at Liam's house because he keeps seeing the dead body that they found in the last episode. He keeps seeing it, and it's like Afterimages is where the name of the episode comes from, and it's like amplifying. He's just completely afraid, and in some ways so is Liam. And then shortly thereafter, Lori, Brett's sister, approaches Scott and tells him that Brett's missing, and so Brett kind of calls all the werewolves of the pack and whatnot to go on a hunting party to go out and find him, whereas Mason, Corey, and Lydia are trying to use Lydia's powers to figure stuff out. And then also, I'm going to break all these up later, but then at the same time, Melissa's trying to examine the body that they found in the showers. So, let's go through Lydia, Corey, and Mason stuff. So they're in the chemistry lab, and they're kind of doing something very similar to what Deaton had Lydia do in the first half of the season. She's staring at a flame, and they're trying to get her to do automatic writing, and it's kind of a little bit funny at first because Mason and Corey won't stop talking, and she can't focus, and then eventually, when she does focus, she's basically writing the number 68 a bunch of times over in various things like Roman numerals and Chinese, using the periodic table. So everything kind of focuses around the number 68. And so then she's like, okay, I need to, figure this out on my own. And she kind of leaves Corey and Mason, and she tries things. She tries walking 68 steps. She tries 68, locker number 68. Nothing seems to be working. And then we cut to the library, in which Nolan's up there, and I could not remember the character's name last week. I think his name's Aaron, the guy who had the spiders crawl in his mouth. He's talking to Nolan. He says, "Oh, you see that how he just shows up, and he's talking about Corey, and he convinces Nolan that he needs to, to prove what he's seeing." So, kind of like the scene in the trailer and the sneak peek, Nolan starts asking questions about if DNA changes, and then stabs Corey in the hand, and then when it visibly heals, everybody sees it, and that was kind of like his test to see for that. And then as he's leaving, he runs into Lydia, and Lydia sees that his lacrosse number is 68. So she confronts him, and she asks him about Brett, and then he kind of slowly figures out that she's one of them, and then runs off. And then Mason, Corey, and Lydia deduce that he's trying to exploit in the existence of the supernatural, and Lydia decides that it's not, her visions wasn't of everybody turning on each other, it's of people turning on them, and they realize it's already starting to happen. Chris and Melissa's story's a lot easier to kind of to get into, because Melissa's trying to examine the body, but she's feeling naturally terrified by it, so she pulls the cover off in the morgue over the head. She doesn't like that, so she tries to cut the arm, but every time she tries, the lights start flickering, and she runs out into the hallway in fear. So she calls Argent, and she gets him to do it, and he kind of suffers the same thing. He's terribly afraid. So the next time they try and tag team it, with Argent holding a gun to its head, he says, "If it moves, I'm going to shoot it." And they try to distract each other, and eventually they do get the tissue sample. But under further investigation, they kind of find out that there's no DNA, there's no cells. Like, it's very weird, and yet this body is also somehow amplifying the fear around. And then the last little scene is them talking. It's really awkward of them talking about what happened at the end of 6A, because, they kiss at the end of 6A, and I guess that was all the further that went. They didn't talk to each other. They talked about how they should have called, and then he's like, I should probably go, and she says, you don't have to go. So who knows? Who knows how that ends up? I mean, maybe that'll be a funny thing that happens in the next episode, where we find out, where, like, Scott shows up and he finds out about that. I mean, I don't know, what if he doesn't know that this has happened? That could also be very funny. So the bulk of the episode is spent with Scott, Malia, Liam, and Lori. So they're running around the woods and they're following Liam's trail, and they determine, that there's 2 hunters, and that for whatever reason, maybe the hunters aren't as amateur as they thought, because they've determined that, the arrow's probably poisoned, so that's why Brett's not healing. And the same kind of thing is that as Gerard and Monroe are tracking him, they realize that, Brett's trying to lead them off the track, and Monroe is really quick to just fall into, like, he went this way, but it's a false trail, and everybody eventually tracks him underground. Gerard, just by knowing how a lot of times how werewolves work, and Lori, because she just knows that that's where Brett would go, because he stacks the stones in, like, a Buddhist way that they learned from their alpha, Satomi, who's also noticeably absent. I wonder if they're going to bring her in, but I digress. That's another little issue in and of itself. So down in the tunnels, you kind of get dueling conversations of how, Lori's desperate. Lori and Liam are a lot more desperate to try to find Brett, whereas Scott and Malia are trying to stay calm, which eventually leads to Liam roaring to try to let Brett know that they're looking for him. And Gerard and Monroe decide to use this to their advantage, and they decide they're going to try to divide up the wolves. And they do this by setting up a trap, which sends like a spiked bar that looks like it has werewolf claws sticking out of it, and it impales Scott. So Malia stays with him, and then Liam and Lori go off to go try to find him. And then while they're kind of stuck there, that's how Scott and Malia determine that it's Gerard who'd be down there, because they determine the trap has been there for forever, and so it has to be somebody who knows these tunnels very well, and so that would be Gerard. Of course he would know how they work. So and Monroe is constantly questioning Gerard. She's like, why aren't we just catching him? Like, we need to kill this werewolf. And he says, it's more than just killing one werewolf. And he goes, we're trying to build an army, not just to hunt one werewolf, to hunt them all. And so Scott and Malia try to follow Liam and Lori, because they realize, this is a lot more of a dangerous situation than we would have thought. But Scott can't do it. I mean, he's been poisoned by the thing, and Malia figures out that she can't take his pain, and they kind of have a conversation, which is another little ship moment that they have, because they're kind of talking, and Malia's like, I'm not going to lose you too. And he goes, you're not going to, he's like, yeah, me, us, you know what I mean? And he goes, yeah, I guess so. And they're talking, they should have got Styles, but Styles would hate us because we didn't get him, but at the same time, and Scott says, I think Styles would be okay with us, and then he kind of passes out. And then when Malia actually reaches out and kind of touches his face, she's able to take his pain. And so I'm curious as to how quickly things are going to go for them. Like, I wonder if it's going to be within the next couple of episodes. I'd say no earlier than 5, maybe 6. I mean, who knows? Depending on how they do it, it could very much play out, and who knows? I like the pacing that they've been doing this. There was inklings of it in 6, and then we kind of had the first moment in 2, and then we'll have the moment in 3. So who knows where things are going to go forward? But who knows? But then with Liam and Lori, they're running around, and they're having trouble finding Brett. But then they eventually find it that they can track the smell of the poison, because it smells like he's rotting. And eventually they do find him, and they pick him up, and they're trying to carry him out. But then they hear something, and it looks like there's an explosion and an emitter going off. So Liam tells Lori and Brett to go, and he goes off to try to fight the hunters. But it turns out there's no hunters there, that it's a trap to separate them. So as Lori and Brett climb up the thing, Liam tries to stop them. But when they get out onto the street, they're both hit by a car. And Liam just kind of gets angry and jumps up after them, and he sees them both laying there. And Lori crawls to her brother and she tries to take his pain, but she can't, and then it appears that both of them die. And so then Liam gets angry and he roars, and then you see that there are a bunch of other cars stopping, and everybody sees him as a werewolf. And then it's revealed that was Gerard's plan all along, and he says, the best way to build an army is through fear. And that's kind of where the episode ends. So I think this was a very good episode. I think Tyler Posey did a great job as a director. I think, it looks different. You can tell that, it's from the episode's done from a different perspective in a way. It's done from a more, from an actor's perspective, how an actor would look at things. And I think that works because, he's, again, at the point of when he was directing this episode, he had done 92 episodes of the show. So it makes sense that, he would understand how things work. And I think just things work. I like the progression that, people are getting afraid and that they're adjusting and they're acknowledging it. The Melissa and Argent's things kind of going, Scott and Malia's things growing. The whole thing with Brett and Lori, I kind of figured Brett would die. I kind of had predicted that because it looked like that in one of the trailers. It looked like Brett. I figured Brett would die because that would make sense. I almost think it sucks a little bit that they killed off Lori simply because, for the most part, this was the first episode where we really got to meet and know her character. She was in season 4 for a little bit, and then her main thing in season 5 was that she had that fight with Kira during the lacrosse game. She and Kira got that fight, and that was pretty cool. But I feel like this episode was really cool, and it was really cool to explore her character, and now they're not going to be able to do that anymore. I also kind of caught hints, which is, again, since Victoria Morales had to leave the show and she was subsequently written off the show. I kind of thought that, for a second I was like, oh, are they trying to set up Liam and Lori? Are they trying to set that up? But who knows, because I think they left it kind of ambiguous whether or not she dies. I assume that she did, just because of the way that the episode ended up ending with the cars surrounding them, but I don't know. I wish maybe they would have done that a little differently. So, yeah, that's this episode. One thing I do want to add is that next week, and I haven't decided how exactly I'm going to do this next week, there are going to be 2 episodes of Teen Wolf coming out. They're doing both episodes 14 and 15 are coming out next Sunday because the following Sunday, which is great because the following Sunday is the VMAs, which, sure, but even more importantly because I wouldn't be able to watch it live anyway, that Sunday is the final episode of season 7 of Game of Thrones, which, I'm sorry, I'm going to watch that over Teen Wolf. Even though Teen Wolf's my favorite show, I would definitely say that Game of Thrones is a better show. So, if you like this stuff, you can like and subscribe to this channel if you want, but I definitely do recommend liking and subscribing to Plugged On. I think I forgot last week, but I'll try to put a link to it in the description here. But thank you guys so much for watching. Again, you'll watch all the reviews here. I'm not sure if I'm going to do one video for both episodes next week or if I'm going to make it 2 separate. I might make it 2 separate just because it'll be a little bit easier to dissect. So, yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and I shall talk to you later.